you as an individual, yes, you should love and be generous and show as much kindness as possible, but I feel that you have the right to also protect your space, protect your mindset, protect your emotions, protect your family. I was heartbroken, and I've realized over the years that relationships are a two-way street. If you are continuously giving and giving and not receiving, there's something wrong. Hello, my friends. How are you today? How are you today? I hope that you've had a wonderful day, and I pray that you have a good night's sleep, or a good day if you're watching this in the daytime. Today, I wanted to do a different type of video. I've had on my mind for a while that I wanted to try and do videos that were helpful in some way, not just videos that are relaxing or somewhat entertaining. I will be uploading more of my scripture videos soon, but I haven't been able to do as many of those as I wanted, just because I want to make sure that when I'm reading the Word of God and sharing things from my perspective, that I'm saying things in the right way and interpreting the scriptures the right way. But in this video, I wanted to share some of my personal life experiences, as I felt that the things that I've been through might be helpful for others to hear about, and it might resonate with some of you and help you to come to a point of understanding in your own lives, and come to a point of realizing that it's okay to not necessarily have everything sorted out, and help you to feel like you're not alone in whatever situation you're going through. I'm very aware that a lot of the opinions that I will have are not opinions that everyone will agree with. One, because I am a Christian, and two, just because I do believe a lot of my opinions are somewhat unique. But this is a safe space, and you don't have to agree with my perspective on things. I would just ask that you would be respectful to people's opinions in the comments, and that you would at least try and understand where I'm coming from. I felt that it would be appropriate to have some triggers with me while I'm telling my story. And even though I know that ASMR is oftentimes for sleep, I do enjoy listening to ASMR artists in the day sometimes, or in situations where I am working or cleaning the house. And I thought that this might be a video that people could play in the background and still have some relaxing sounds that they enjoy, but have something that might make them feel encouraged to listen to, and something that will help them to unwind as the day goes on. So, let's get started. Today, I want to talk about having boundaries in friendships and relationships, and understanding that it's okay to say no, especially when you've given people a lot of chances and you have given them a lot of patience and you've poured a lot of your time and love and resources into them. I would say that I'm bringing this up today because I've had some interesting situations happening to me recently, and I just felt that a lot of people may be going through the same situation, especially as time goes on and people reach new milestones in their lives. I find that in a lot of situations people will have friendships that try to come back around, or a blast from the past in some way that you've stepped away from at one point that may try to resurface. And I find personally that as a Christian, it's very difficult for me and others that I've seen to balance the difference, or should I say to know the difference between being gracious and loving and accepting of people as they are, versus not compromising in your beliefs and putting up appropriate boundaries and knowing when to say no to certain situations. I've personally found this to be a difficult balance to strike in my life, and I think that now that I am where I am, it's becoming easier for me, and it's becoming second nature for me to be able to put up boundaries, and for me to know that just because somebody is in a particular situation, or just because they are coming back into your life and saying that they want to try again with their relationship, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've changed, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to accept them back into your life. And for me, that's something that's been interesting, because as a Christian we are taught to forgive and to have grace and to be loving and to be respectful of others and accepting, and to not be judgmental if we can. But what I'm learning as time is going on is that there is a balance, and that in that balance it is actually important to make certain judgments about people's decisions. And it doesn't mean that you're judging them as a human being, but it means that you're judging their actions as they show them to you, and you're making decisions about what's best for you and for them in certain situations, just so that you can be safe and so that they can be safe. And I'm going to give an example of this because I know that in the world that we live in today, making judgments about people's behavior is frowned upon, especially if you're a Christian person. People love to kind of throw that in your face. And even when you're not a Christian, I've seen a lot of people who are quite kind and loving, and they might have relatives or friends who would try to take advantage of them, and when they would try and stand up for themselves, it would be, oh, but I thought you cared about me, I thought you loved me, I thought you wanted the best for me, when that person has actually been pushed to a breaking point. And so I wanted to tell you two stories of I wanted to tell you two stories of two young ladies who have recently popped back into my life. And the reason I wanted to tell these two stories is because, again, as a Christian, I have always felt compelled to accept people and to try and understand where they're coming from and try and be gracious. But as I have studied more, I've realized that if a person hasn't changed, you can't actually expect anything different from them if they haven't made any commitment to do something different with their life. And it's actually not your responsibility to try and force them or even encourage them to go in the right direction if that's not what they want to do. And it's interesting because God gives us all a choice, in my opinion. We all have choices, whether to do good or bad. And as much as God will try and encourage you to do the right thing, if you choose to do the wrong thing, He will let you do that, because you're not a robot. You have free choice. And yeah, let me just start with the stories, and then it will help you to understand why I've come to the conclusion I've come to. So, I have recently been contacted by two old associates of mine. One I would consider a definite associate, and one I would consider a friend. I would say that at one point these girls were both girls that I considered to be as close to me as sisters, and I hoped and wished that we would be friends forever, and that our relationship would continue to blossom and grow, and that things would work in our favors. And one friend I am now trying to give a second chance to, and another friend I am being cordial, but I'm keeping them at a distance. And this is the person who really I would consider more of an associate than a friend. So here's the background. Quite a few years ago, I was good friends with a young woman. I'm not gonna say her real name, but for the sake of this video, let's call her Siobhan, just because it's the furthest away from her name that I can think of. Siobhan was beautiful inside and out. She was the type of woman that people just are drawn to. You know, one of those people that they have gifting, and not just gifting because they're physically attractive, but gifting because they actually have a sweet personality and they have a good temperament. And this young lady was going through a hard time, and basically I ended up taking her into my home for a short period of time. This is when I was still living with my family before I was married, and she had a child, and her child came with her, and basically we were very, very close. We were very, very just connected in the way that we thought about things, in the direction that it seemed like we were both going in. She was a Christian as well at the time, and she was incredibly gifted and incredibly special in my opinion. And I felt a burden to help her, not just because she was in need, but because I really felt like this girl had potential to do amazing things, and because she just hadn't had the opportunity, she wasn't necessarily in the best space physically, mentally, financially. And so for a long time she stayed in my home, and when I say a long time, I only mean maybe 3 or 4 months, but even before that point we had established a good relationship, and essentially we were at a point where it really felt that she was progressing, she was doing really well. Because she came to my church, she had joined several, I don't want to say committees, but she had basically become well ingrained in the church. She was in several ministries, and she was really a part of the heartbeat of our church, if that makes sense. And basically the reason there was a change in our relationship was because she got to a point where she knew that there were certain things that she would have to do in order to move forward. And I don't know whether it was because she was scared or because she was doubtful of her own abilities or the fact that God would look after her. But basically, she, after doing so well and her child doing well, she got to a point where it was obvious that she was starting to backslide. And I say that because that's a word that often Christians will use when somebody who has been quite strong in the faith starts to wane in their faith and in their responsibilities and what they believe in. And so it was very awkward for me, because instead of trying to judge her, I tried to just encourage her, and I tried to let her know that this was not a good thing for her. And I asked her about her opinions when it came to her relationship with God, and basically she had made it very clear to me that she felt that God had told her to do some very specific things. She said that God had made it clear that she was supposed to live in a particular area. She said that God had made it clear to her that she was supposed to be a part of certain ministries, and she said that God had made it clear that she was supposed to basically do different things in terms of her work situation. And essentially what was interesting about this scenario was that because of the fact that she was starting to lose her faith and she was starting to do things that she shouldn't necessarily do, all of the things that she felt that God had told her, she was going back on. And she came to a point where she felt that she needed to move away. And basically I said to her that I didn't think it was right. And not just because she had been doing so well and she had been making good progress in the avenues that she was moving in, but because it would also be bad for her child. And I reminded her that she had said that these are the things that God had mentioned to her, and that these are the things that she felt that were right to do, and that there seemed to be confirmation in those things because she had already started moving in those areas. So she had already started joining the ministries that I was talking about, and she was making a real impact and making a real improvement. But when it came to actually making the leap that she needed to make, I think it probably was a thing of her being afraid. And what was interesting is I tried to convince her a couple of times that she shouldn't be leaving, because where she was going was putting herself and her child in a very compromising position, because the family that she was going to not only had different values to what she believed in, but it would have put her in a situation where she was the only one in her family who was trying to live a certain way. And the only way I can explain it is if, let's say for example, your whole family are heavy football supporters, and you decide that football is not for you anymore, you're going to move away from that lifestyle. And so you start moving away from the lifestyle, and then all of a sudden, even though you're doing really well and you no longer have an obsession with football and you're doing excellent, all of a sudden, because you get afraid of where you are, you start to feel pressured to go back to what you used to know. And so you decide to make a move back in the position that you already came from, if that makes sense. And so basically that's what she decided to do. And I was heartbroken, and the reason I was heartbroken wasn't just because she decided to move away quite suddenly, but she stopped doing everything that she was doing when it came to her responsibilities in the church, and she basically just decided that she was going to do whatever she needed to do to make herself feel comfortable again, rather than striving for what would be better for her and for her child. And don't get me wrong, I do believe that in the moment she convinced herself that this was something that would be better for her and her child. But if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that you need to believe what people tell you. When they show you who they are, you should believe it. And so I know that when she had originally spoken about what she felt that God was telling her to do, I know that that was what she was supposed to do, because not only did she say strongly that this is what she felt she was supposed to do, but it all made sense in how her life lined up and how she was moving, and it was all progressive. None of it was anything that was going back to her past or anything that was going back to a toxic situation. It was all stuff that was moving forward, and her moving away now was just her giving up, if that made sense. What was interesting about the whole situation was that when she did move, everything that I told her that would happen happened. She ended up realizing that her family was not what she thought they were, and basically she did like a whole loop, and it basically kind of just threw her life into a direction of nothingness. And what's sad about the situation is this young lady was a single mother, and I remember saying to her, if you go in this direction, you're going against the progress that you've made, and you will find yourself once again in the same situation. And where she was a single mother of one, a few years later she's now a single mother of two, and basically her life just went all the way back in the same direction that she had come from. Instead of moving forward, she moved back, all the way back to the beginning of her journey. And I say this because we obviously had some words about this, because as I move forward in my life, I know that I can't pretend with people. I know that it doesn't help me or them to lie or not tell the truth about certain situations. And this was extremely difficult for me, and what made it difficult was that I had to watch her undo all of the hard work that she had put in. And recently she popped back into my life, and not only was she back in the same situation but worse now, but when I asked her about her life and her situation, basically it just seemed like, on the one hand it seemed like she did take accountability for a lot of things, but on the other hand it seemed like she was making excuses for why things had happened. And the thing that I noticed the most, which is why I felt that I should keep her at arm's length, is that even though she acknowledged that she had made the wrong decisions and she acknowledged that she shouldn't have done certain things, she did not in any way acknowledge how her decisions affected me or how her decisions affected the people in ministry that she was working with. Because when she left, it was devastating. And it was devastating for me because me and my family had put a lot of time into her and her child, and we loved her. We loved her like a family member. I loved her like a sister. My parents loved her like a daughter. And it was really tragic. I remember the night that she left, and I literally broke down in tears and just cried. And I wasn't just crying because she'd left and because I knew that this was the wrong decision for her, but I was crying because I knew that the relationship that we had really was over and that it would probably never be the same again. And it was very tragic. And I remember saying to her years later, Siobhan, why did you make this decision? And now she's kind of more so admitting that she made a mistake, but she insisted that she did the right thing, even though the outcome of her decision was that she took all these steps backward into the same situation she'd just come from. So now that she's back again in my life, I have to realize that regardless of what she says, her actions are the thing that I need to look at. And even though there seemingly is accountability in what she has said in some ways, because in a lot of ways she has made excuses and she's doing the exact same things that she did at the beginning of our relationship in the first place, I honestly can't look at her and say that my life would be better if she was in it in the same way that she was before. And what I realized is that I actually invested a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of love, a lot of care into the relationship with her, and I don't think she ever really valued it. And that was a very difficult thing for me, because I never thought about myself as being the type of person who would be able to just not respond to people in certain situations. And again, I haven't been rude to her or anything like that, but I realized that it was actually a toxic relationship for me to be a part of, because if somebody is determined to live their life how they want to live it, there's actually nothing that you can do. And by you trying to encourage them or be a part of their lives too regularly, it actually just drags you down, and it doesn't help you at all. Especially when you realize that you have given this person far more than they've ever given you in terms of love, support, or anything like that. So that was friendship number one, or associate number one. On the other hand, I have recently got back in contact with a young lady, and I'm going to call her Taylor. And the reason I'm telling this story is because I want to demonstrate the difference in how somebody's attitude and somebody's approach can really show you if it's safe for this person to come back into your life. And when this young lady came back into my life, her approach and her attitude and demeanor was completely different from that of the first young lady. So, to give a brief synopsis, this was also a young woman who was very much so a part of my life, very much so a part of ministries in the church that I'm involved in, and she was in a relationship that was quite toxic. And to cut a long story short, they got engaged, and initially when they got engaged, I felt that everything was okay, because even though they had certain struggles in their relationship, they were getting counselling and it seemed like they were doing well. However, for whatever reason, the counselling stopped, and when the counselling stopped, things became very aggressive, toxic, and just destructive for them both. But because of the fact that I considered Taylor to be my friend more so than her fiance, I obviously was more so concerned about her welfare. And it came to a point where I was so concerned that I prayed and I asked God to give me wisdom about whether or not I should be in her wedding, because I just felt so terribly convicted about being a part of something that seemed so dangerous and so volatile. And what was crazy is that I wasn't the only person who felt this way. I remember thinking to myself, this cannot be healthy, this cannot be a good sign if other people are also feeling that this is a dangerous situation. And I remember praying one day and I said, God, please tell me what I should be doing in this situation. I don't want to stand up in church and lie and make it seem like I support this relationship when I really feel in my heart that this is going to be detrimental for both of them. And I remember praying and asking God to confirm with me through 3 people whether or not this decision was a right decision for me to make, whether or not I should still be a bridesmaid. And I said that if 3 people came to me and told me that this was something that they felt wasn't the right thing, that I would back out. And that was very difficult for me because, sorry, my battery nearly died. That was something very difficult for me because I've always been the type of person that if I say I'm going to do something, I want to try and do it. And the only way I would want to back out is if it was detrimental for me or for that other person. So I remember after that prayer, the same day I had 3 people come up to me and tell me how concerned they were about Taylor and her fiance. And one of them was a lady that she lived with at the time. Another one of them was a friend of hers. And another one of them was the groom's sister. And it was interesting because as much as I didn't know if our relationship would be over because of this decision, I just felt like this was not the right thing for her. And I remember speaking to her, and I remember saying that I didn't feel like I could be a bridesmaid anymore. And basically she was really angry with me. She didn't shout at me, but she basically said she didn't want to be my friend anymore. And then she left, and I remember going into the bathroom and crying because I was just so upset that I had let her down, that and that I couldn't be there for her. But at the same time, I knew that I couldn't lie. I couldn't pretend like this was going to be something that was good for her. And in the coming days, she did, try and reach out to me, but it was more so to try and, reason with me about why I wanted to change my mind, and I stood firm in what I believed. And it was interesting because not being a part of her life for that period of time was very difficult for me. But recently she's come back into my life, and she's now sadly going through a divorce. And what I appreciated about the whole situation was that she came back to me and she said to me, "You were right, and I'm so sorry that I mistreated you, and you were a good friend to me, and I'm sorry I didn't listen to you." And interestingly enough, the thing that got me, it wasn't the fact that she said I was right. That wasn't what it was that made me feel appreciated or considered. It was that she acknowledged that I was a good friend to her, and that she acknowledged that I was only trying to do what was right for her in the situation. And she acknowledged that really it wasn't just me that she wasn't listening to, but that she was trying to fight a losing battle with herself. And because of the situation she was in, she realized that she needed to change, and that no matter what support she was getting from others, it wasn't until she changed that things would be different for her. And so she actually ended up writing me a letter, which was really nice, and basically just saying that she was sorry and she wanted to know my opinion on how she had treated me. And I remember speaking to her and basically just letting her know that I wasn't angry with her, I didn't bear her any ill will, but that I was actually proud of her for making the decision that she made and for trusting the process of getting to know herself, trusting God, knowing that she's valuable and worth more than whatever this person, was saying she was worth. And it's interesting because even though I still have some boundaries in place with her, I feel much more comfortable with her than I do with the first girl. And I say this because they both recently come back into my life, and Taylor has been very transparent. She has made it clear that she has developed and changed, and Siobhan, although she's come back into my life and I think she's realised that I was a good friend to her, she's not made any such declarations, and she's really sort of more so acting as if she still knows what she's doing, and she appreciates the fact that I'm there and still wants to have a relationship with me, but there's no sense of understanding the depths of the mistakes that she's made, if that makes sense. And there's nothing about the way she's approached me that has made me feel like she wouldn't do the same thing again. And as time has gone on, I've learned to use wisdom and really listen to what people are saying when they speak to me, because I think a natural human response is always to assume that people have your best interest in heart because you might have their best interest at heart. And what I've discovered over time is that when somebody reveals their true feelings or reveals how they've come to be in a certain way, you need to trust the process and understand that this is who this person is. And what was interesting about Taylor is that she wasn't just apologizing to me and trying to make things right with me. She was actually doing things of her own accord to change her life. So, thing number 1, she was getting counseling. Thing number 2, she was speaking to other people who she had previously hurt in the past and trying to make things right with them. And thing number 3, she had decided that the relationship she was in was not worth her relationship with God. It was not worth her own happiness and sense of self-worth, and it was not worth the happiness and worth of her children. And there are so many people that I've known throughout the years who, regardless of them knowing that they're on the wrong path, they won't do what's right in the end by making the hard decision to not take the easy road. Because it's far easier, I believe, to do what's wrong than to do what's right. It's like the difference between eating healthy food and exercising and eating chocolate cake and staying up all night. It's very easy to put yourself in a position where you are doing what feels good, but where you know what's not right, or you know that something is not beneficial to you or doesn't sustain you. So I just felt like I should say that it's okay when you're in the situations you're in life. It's okay to say no. It's okay to not necessarily accept everything that people say to you just because they're coming back into your life, or just because they are making or looking like they're trying to make amends. Because I do believe that Siobhan, in her mind, probably thinks she's trying to make amends, but the fact that she's unwilling to admit to her mistakes and she's unwilling to really change her behaviour, even though she's saying she's changing her behaviour, when you look at her actions, she's in the same situation again. And for me, I had to realise this is not something that I need to be a part of. I've given her everything I can give her at this point, and don't get me wrong, I very much so feel, and I have felt, that I do not regret what I did for her. And I've always been a person to believe that you should give because it's out of the goodness of your heart and not because you're necessarily going to benefit from it. And in this situation, I genuinely feel that I've given all that I can. And at the end of the day, if she wants a change in our relationship, if she wants a difference, she has to be different. And it doesn't mean that I will never speak to her, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be rude to her, no. But it does mean that I'm going to keep her at an arm's length, because I've realised over the years that relationships are a two-way street. If you are continuously giving and giving and not receiving, there's something wrong. In the same way, if you're continuously taking and taking and not giving, there's something wrong. And I've always been the type of person to be able to offer people as much support as possible, and generally speaking, I would say that most people, when they come into contact with me and they're in my lives, most people, when they come into contact with me and they're in my life, they benefit in some way. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say things have always been that way, because I know when we're young we can all be selfish, or when we're immature we can make bad decisions. But as an adult, I would say that I've tried my best to be a Christian. I would say that I tried my best to be loving and kind and considerate and to give everything that I have. But I'm realizing now that it's okay to not give if somebody doesn't deserve it. It's okay to not show everything about yourself and to not give yourself away all the time if it's going to hurt you. And I'm realizing that now, and realizing that setting boundaries and creating safe relationships are much better than diving in headfirst into friendships or relationships with people who ultimately don't respect you, who don't deserve it, who don't know your value and your worth, and who come back and act like the thing that you gave them wasn't that big of a deal. And I know when I talk about Siobhan, I know that she would never think about it that way, but for me that's how I see it. And I see it that way because realistically, when I compare the things that I've done for her with what she's done for me, or even just how she thinks about me or how thoughtful she might be in certain situations, I realise that she actually doesn't think about me the way that I think about her. And moving forward in my life, I don't want to continuously feel like I'm drained or in a relationship where it's one-sided. So I just thought I would say this because if any of you are in a situation where somebody's coming back into your life and they're making you feel like maybe you should give them a second chance, of course think about it and weigh up the pros and cons of that relationship, but more so listen to what the person is really saying. Listen to the type of person they are, the situations they put themselves in. Is their life drastically better than it was when you last saw them? Have they moved forward in the way that they operate in the world? And not to be shallow, but just to say, if I've met someone 10 years ago and their life was a mess, I would expect that if I met them in another 10 years, for me to be around them, I would need to see a drastic improvement in their circumstances because of the choices they've made. If in 10 years' time they're still in the same situation and their life is still in a mess and they're just as selfish of a person as when you left them, it doesn't make sense for you to get back in that situation and for you to once again put all of your emotional energy into this relationship just because they tell you that something has changed. Does that make sense? I do feel that when it comes down to it, you as an individual, yes, you should love and be generous and show as much kindness as possible, but I feel that you have the right to also protect your space, protect your mindset, protect your emotions, protect your family, and love as much as you can without necessarily having to be a martyr. And it's interesting because the Bible teaches us that love doesn't necessarily mean like. Love doesn't necessarily mean that you give a person everything they want. Sometimes love can actually mean judgment. It can actually mean telling them that they're wrong. It can mean discipline. It can even mean punishment. Because the truth of the matter is, if somebody has done something wrong, it actually hurts them to act like it's fine. And when I say punishment, I don't mean you should go around trying to punish people, no. But I mean, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you for example, like Siobhan, if you put your child in a situation where they're finally stable and then all of a sudden you decide to move them away for no reason, you have to understand that that is going to cause your child to have mental and emotional distress, and that is going to affect them. But you also have to realize that if you are now in this person's life, that's going to drastically affect you, and you have to realize that nothing in this life happened without some kind of consequence, and the punishment in that circumstance would be that you now have to remove yourself from that person's life because of the choices that they've made. And it's okay for you to do that if it's a choice that they've made, as long as you are trying to do what's right, and as long as you are holding yourself accountable and making sure that you're not doing anything that is equally as bad or equally destructive. You have to understand that your role doesn't always have to be the role of someone who's going to save a person, if that makes sense. I've realised that Jesus is the only one who saves, in my opinion, and as much as I will try and encourage and show love and support, I can't pretend when somebody is not doing what's right. I hope that something that I've said made sense in my ramblings, and I really hope that when it comes down to it, you can relate to something and know that it's okay to protect your mindset and protect your peace. It's okay to give someone a second chance if they've come to the knowledge of their mistakes and they've come to an understanding that they need to change. But it's also okay to not give them a second chance if they haven't understood those things. I'm glad that in my life I have my relationship with God, because what I've discovered is that throughout everything in my life, He has been the one person who has consistently been there for me, and no matter what hurt or fear I might have faced, I know that He is always there for me, and I know that whatever struggle or hurt I'm going through, in the end, as long as I follow Him and do what He says, I won't fail. Pray that God will bless you in whatever difficult circumstance you're dealing with, and I want to pray that God will give you wisdom and understanding when it comes to setting boundaries in your relationships, and just pray that you will get a good night's sleep and have a good few days coming. Father God, I pray that whoever is watching this will get some kind of relief from understanding that they're not the only person going through these circumstances. I pray, Lord, that you would give them your peace, that you would help them to have a relationship with you at some point, and that you would help them to understand that when things are difficult, they can call on you, and that you would give them everything that they need in accordance to your will. In Jesus' name, amen.